The stars had never seen anything like it before. 3,000 warships floated in perfect formation around the core worlds of the Corvan Empire. Each vessel was massive, their dark hulls covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities. The fleet stretched across space like a metal wall, blocking out the light from distant suns. Admiral Zexthol stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with his 4 eyes. The ship was so large that it had its own gravity, and cities built inside its hull where millions of Corvan warriors lived and worked. For 6 months, the reports had been coming in. The humans were moving through Corvan space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. Each attack was worse than the last. The humans fought in ways that made no sense to any civilized species. They struck without warning, used weapons that seemed to break the laws of physics, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Entire star systems had gone dark, their defense fleets simply vanishing without sending distress signals. Corvan Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species, enslaved entire worlds, and built the most powerful military force known to exist. Their ships were armed with plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, their shields could stop anything, and their warriors were bred for combat from birth. No enemy had ever posed a real threat to their dominance, but the humans were different. They had appeared from nowhere, a species that no one had heard of before. The first contact had been peaceful enough, with human diplomats visiting Corvan, stations to trade and learn about galactic civilization. The aliens had seemed weak and primitive, with soft skin and small bodies that looked like they would break easily. The Corvan leadership had dismissed them as another, minor species that would eventually bow to their superior power. That mistake had cost them dearly. The humans had been studying them all along, learning their weaknesses, mapping their defenses, and planning their attack. When the war finally began, it was not the humans who suffered. Corvan outposts fell one by one, their defenders killed so efficiently that many never even saw their attackers. The few survivors who escaped told stories that seemed impossible. They spoke of human ships that moved faster than light without using jump drives, weapons that could destroy a battleship with a single shot, and soldiers who fought like machines, with no fear of death. Admiral Zexthol had demanded answers from his intelligence officers. How could a species that had only just discovered faster than light travel be defeating the greatest military force in the galaxy? The reports they brought back were disturbing. Human technology was not just advanced, it was revolutionary. They had developed weapons and defenses that operated on principles that Corvan science could barely understand. Their ships used something called quantum tunneling to move through space. Their weapons fired concentrated dark matter, and their computers could predict enemy movements before they happened. The Admiral had seen enough. He had gathered every available ship from across the Empire and brought them to protect the core worlds. If the humans wanted to conquer the Corvan Empire, they would have to face the full might of their military. 3,000 of the most advanced warships ever, built, crewed by 10 million of the Empire's finest warriors, all waiting for the human fleet to arrive. The waiting was the worst part. Long-range sensors showed nothing approaching their position. Communications intercepts revealed no human fleet movements in nearby systems. For weeks, the massive defensive force had maintained their positions, expecting at any moment to see the enemy armada that would surely be needed to challenge such overwhelming firepower. Then the message had arrived. A single transmission from human space, broadcast on all military frequencies. The voice was calm and professional, speaking in perfect Corvan. Corvan Empire, you have been judged guilty of crimes against galactic peace. Your military forces will be destroyed and your government will surrender unconditionally. Prepare to face justice. The Admiral had laughed when he heard it. The humans were clearly insane, if they thought they could threaten the assembled might of the Corvan Empire. But his laughter died when the sensor operators reported what they were detecting. A single ship was approaching their position. Not a fleet, not an armada, just one vessel moving at impossible speed toward their defensive line. The ship appeared on the tactical displays as nothing more than a small dot, barely visible against the vastness of space. It was moving in a straight line toward the center of their formation, making no attempt to hide or avoid detection. The sensor readings were confusing and contradictory. Sometimes the ship appeared to be made of solid metal. Other times it seemed to be composed of pure energy. Its size kept changing, appearing massive one moment and tiny the next. Admiral Zextel ordered his communications officer to contact the approaching vessel. The response came immediately in the same calm human voice that had delivered the ultimatum. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Vengeance. You have 1 hour to disperse your fleet and surrender. This is your only warning." The bridge fell silent. The human captain was either completely insane or he knew something that the Corvan military did not. One ship against 3,000 was not a battle, it was suicide. No species in the galaxy had ever developed technology that could overcome such overwhelming odds. Even the most advanced weapons could only destroy a limited number of targets before being overwhelmed by return fire. But as the USS Vengeance continued its approach, something began to change in the sensor readings. The ship was not just moving. Toward them, it was scanning their entire fleet. Every vessel, every weapon, every defensive system was being analyzed and cataloged. The human ship seemed to be gathering intelligence about their capabilities, while showing no concern for the massive firepower being aimed at it. The admiral realized that the humans were not coming to fight a battle. They were coming to deliver a message. The question was whether the Corvan Empire would live long enough to understand what that message meant. Captain Jake Morrison stood perfectly still on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the tactical display fill with red dots. Each dot represented a Corvan warship, and there were thousands of them arranged in defensive formations that stretched across 3 star systems. His crew worked around him with quiet efficiency, their voices calm and professional, despite facing odds that should have terrified any sane person. The bridge was different from anything the Corvan Empire had ever seen. Clean white surfaces covered in displays that showed information in ways that seemed almost alive. The crew members wore simple black uniforms without decoration, their faces focused on tasks that required perfect coordination. No one showed fear or excitement, just the steady concentration of people who had trained for exactly this moment. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across controls that responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. She had been monitoring Corvan military channels for hours, listening to their confused chatter as they tried to understand what was happening. The alien commanders were arguing among themselves, some demanding immediate attack while others insisted on waiting for reinforcements that would never come at the weapons station. Lieutenant Kevin Walsh ran continuous diagnostics on systems that no other species had ever encountered. The USS Vengeance carried weapons that operated on principles that Corvan science considered impossible. Each system had been tested and refined through decades of preparation, designed specifically for the kind of battle they were about to fight. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez worked in the engine room, monitoring power flows that would have melted the hull of any conventional starship. The Vengeance used a quantum reactor that drew energy from the space between dimensions, providing nearly unlimited power for weapons and defenses that existed at the edge of known physics. Her team of engineers had spent years learning to control forces that could tear apart reality itself. The ship's AI, which the crew called Charlie, processed information at speeds that made conventional computers look like toys. It monitored every Corvin vessel simultaneously, analyzing their weapons, predicting their movements, and calculating attack patterns that would maximize damage while minimizing risk. Charlie spoke in the same calm voice that all crew members used, its responses coming so quickly that conversations felt like thoughts. Captain Morrison had served in the human military for 20 years, but this was his first command of a fourth-generation warship. He had been chosen not just for his tactical skills, but for his ability to think in ways that alien minds could not predict. His brain had been enhanced with implants that allowed him to process information at superhuman speeds, making decisions that required analyzing thousands of variables simultaneously. The 1-hour deadline was approaching when Admiral Zex Thu finally responded to their ultimatum. The alien's voice crackled across the communication channels, filled with the kind of arrogance that came from centuries of unopposed dominance. Human vessel, you are either insane or you possess weapons beyond our understanding. No single ship can defeat this fleet. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Captain Morrison smiled slightly, the first emotion he had shown since entering the system. He nodded to Lieutenant Commander Park, who opened a channel to the entire Corvin fleet. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Admiral Zexthal, I am Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Vengeance. We are here to demonstrate humanity's capabilities and offer your empire a choice. You can surrender now and join the galactic community as equals, or you can resist and face the consequences. Your fleet is impressive, but it represents technology that humanity surpassed decades ago. The response from the Corvin fleet was immediate and predictable. Thousands of ships began powering up their weapons, their crews preparing for battle. The alien commanders had decided that the humans were bluffing, and no species could possibly possess the technology needed to defeat such overwhelming numbers. Lieutenant Walsh reported weapon systems fully charged and ready. The USS Vengeance carried 12 different types of weapons, each designed for specific tactical situations. Dark matter cannons for destroying heavily armored targets, quantum torpedoes for area effect damage, and particle beams for precision strikes. A ship could engage thousands of targets simultaneously, something that conventional weapons could never achieve. Commander Ryan Brooks monitored the defensive systems from his position at the tactical station. The Vengeance was protected by shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making it nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. The ship's hull was composed of materials that could adapt to different types of attack, becoming harder or softer as needed to deflect or absorb incoming fire dot. As the deadline approached, Captain Morrison made one final attempt at peaceful resolution. Admiral, your fleet is powerful, but power without wisdom leads only to destruction. We have studied your tactics, your weapons, and your defenses for 50 years. We know exactly how this battle will end. Please reconsider. The Corvin response was to open fire. 3,000 warships launched their weapons simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize entire worlds. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and missile swarms converged on the position where the USS Vengeance had been detected, but the human ship was no longer there. In the instant before the weapons reached their target, the Vengeance had simply vanished. From normal space, the massive barrage struck empty vacuum, the energy dispersing harmlessly into the darkness between stars. The Corvin fleet commanders stared at their displays in confusion. Their sensors showed no trace of the human vessel, no energy signature, no debris field. It was as if the ship had never existed at all. Some of the alien officers began to wonder if they had been fighting a ghost, a phantom created by their own fear and uncertainty. Then the USS Vengeance reappeared, not where it had been, but directly in the center of the Corvin formation. The ship materialized between two massive battleships, so close that their crews could see the smooth hull through their viewports. Before anyone could react, the human vessel opened fire. The weapons that struck the Corvan ships were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Dark matter beams tore through their shields as if they were made of paper, disrupting the molecular bonds that held their hulls together. The targeted vessels simply came apart, their atoms scattered across space in expanding clouds of debris. In the first 30 seconds of combat, the USS Vengeance destroyed over 100 Corvan warships. The survivors tried to return fire, but their weapons could not lock onto a target that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. The human ship moved through their formation like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, each attack more devastating than the last. Admiral Zexthil watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that operated according to rules he did not understand. The humans had not come to fight a battle. They had come to deliver a lesson. The question was whether the Corvan Empire would survive long enough to learn from it. The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The USS Vengeance moved through the Corvan fleet like a predator hunting prey, appearing and disappearing at will, while its weapons carved through enemy formations with surgical precision. What should have been a massacre of the lone human ship had become a demonstration of technology so advanced that it seemed like magic to the alien observers. Captain Morrison stood calmly on his bridge, watching the tactical display as his ship engaged multiple targets simultaneously. The Vengeance existed in several dimensions at once, allowing it to attack from positions that should have been impossible. One moment it was firing its ships on the fleet's left flank. The next it was striking targets on the right side, all while maintaining continuous fire on vessels directly ahead. The Corvan commanders tried desperately to adapt their tactics to fight an enemy that refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare. Admiral Zexthil ordered his ships to form tighter formations, thinking that concentrated firepower would overwhelm the human vessel's defenses. Instead, the closer spacing made it easier for the Vengeance to destroy multiple targets with each attack. Lieutenant Walsh fired the ship's quantum torpedoes into the densest part of the enemy formation. The weapons traveled through folded space, bypassing the Corvan shields entirely before exploding inside their hulls. Each torpedo created a cascade reaction that spread to nearby vessels, turning their own power systems against them. Entire squadrons vanished in brilliant flashes of light as their reactors overloaded. Commander Brooks monitored the incoming fire from his tactical station, watching as thousands of weapons targeted their position. The Corvan fleet was pouring everything they had at the human ship, but their attacks were having no effect. The Vengeance's dimensional shields existed partially outside normal space, making most weapons pass through them harmlessly. When enemy fire did manage to strike the ship's hull, the results were disappointing for the attackers. The Vengeance was constructed from materials that could adapt to different types of damage, becoming harder when struck by kinetic weapons and more flexible when hit by energy beams. The ship's hull actually seemed to grow stronger as the battle continued, learning from each attack and developing new defenses. Chief Engineer Rodriguez worked frantically in the engine room, managing power flows that would have been impossible with conventional technology. The quantum reactor was operating at maximum output, providing energy for weapons, shields, and the dimensional manipulation systems that allowed the ship to exist in multiple places at once. Her team monitored readings that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. The ship's AI, Charlie, processed tactical information at speeds that made split-second decisions feel like hours of careful consideration. It tracked every enemy vessel, predicted their movements, and calculated the most efficient ways to destroy them. Charlie also monitored the psychological state of the Corvan crews, noting when their commanders began to panic and adjusting attack patterns to maximize their fear dot as the battle progressed. The Corvin fleet began to understand that they were not fighting a single ship, but something far more advanced. The USS Vengeance seemed to be everywhere at once, its weapons striking from impossible angles, while its defenses made it nearly invulnerable to return fire. The human vessel was not just technologically superior, it was operating according to principles that the aliens could not comprehend. Lieutenant, Commander Park intercepted communications between enemy vessels, listening as their crews reported. Impossible sensor readings. Some ships detected the Vengeance approaching from port, while others showed it attacking from starboard. A few unlucky vessels reported being under attack from multiple directions simultaneously, their crews unable to understand how one ship could be in so many places at once. The Corvin weapons were impressive by conventional standards, but they had been designed to fight enemies that existed in normal space and time. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids passed harmlessly through sections of the human ship that existed in parallel dimensions. Particle beams that could destroy entire cities were absorbed by hull sections that fed the energy back into the ship's weapon systems. Morrison watched as his crew worked with mechanical precision, their actions coordinated through neural interfaces that allowed them to think and react as a single organism. Each crew member had been selected not just for their skills, but for their ability to integrate with the ship's systems. They were not just operating the USS Vengeance, they were part of it. The battle reached a turning point when Admiral Zex Thule ordered his remaining ships to ram the human vessel. If conventional weapons could not destroy it, perhaps kinetic force would succeed where energy had failed. Dozens of Corvin warships accelerated toward the Vengeance's position, their crews prepared to sacrifice themselves to stop the impossible enemy. The human ship's response was to simply phase out of normal space entirely. The Corvin vessels collided with empty vacuum, their hulls crumpling as they struck nothing but their own expectations. The USS Vengeance reappeared moments later, directly above the wreckage, and continued its methodical destruction of the enemy fleet. By the third hour of combat, the Corvin fleet had been reduced to fewer than 1,000 ships. The survivors were scattered across the system, their formations broken and their morale shattered. Many crews had simply abandoned their posts, unable to continue fighting an enemy that seemed to exist outside the laws of physics. Lieutenant Walsh reported that the ship's weapons were operating at peak efficiency, with ammunition supplies still showing full capacity. The Vengeance could sustain this level of combat indefinitely, its quantum systems drawing energy from the fabric of space itself. The human vessel was not just winning the battle, it was demonstrating that victory had been inevitable from the moment it arrived. The Corvin commanders, who were still capable of coherent thought, began to realize that they were witnessing something unprecedented. The humans had not sent a fleet to conquer their empire. They had sent a single ship to deliver a message. That message was clear. Resistance was futile, and the age of Corvin dominance was over. Admiral Zex Thule stared at his tactical displays, watching as his life's work was systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like a force of nature. The Eternal Dominion was one of the few ships that had not yet been targeted, but he knew that was only because the humans were saving it for last. They wanted him to watch, to understand the futility of resistance before his own inevitable destruction. USS Vengeance continued its deadly dance through the remains of the Corvin fleet, each attack more impossible than the last. The human ship was not just demonstrating superior technology, it was rewriting the rules of warfare itself. In a galaxy where battles were won through numbers and firepower, humanity had proven that intelligence and innovation could overcome any advantage. As the battle entered its fourth hour, the remaining Corvin vessels began to receive a new transmission from the human ship. Captain Morrison's voice was still calm and professional, but his words carried the weight of absolute authority. Admiral Zex Thule, you have seen what resistance brings. Your fleet is broken, your empire is defenseless, and your people face extinction. We offer you one final choice. Surrender now and live, or continue fighting and face complete annihilation. The silence that followed Captain Morrison's ultimatum was broken by Admiral Zexthul's desperate transmission. His voice carried the weight of a commander who had watched his entire fleet destroyed by forces he could not understand. Human captain, what are you? No species in the galaxy possesses technology that can do what you have done. Your single ship has destroyed thousands of our finest vessels. We demand an explanation. The response came not from Captain Morrison, but from the ship's AI. Charlie's voice filled the communications channels of every surviving Corvan vessel, speaking in perfect Corvan with the patience of a teacher addressing confused students. Admiral Zexthu, you have encountered a fourth-generation human warship. The USS Vengeance was designed specifically to engage multiple opponents using technology that your species has not yet discovered. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Dr. Helen Carter stepped forward from her position at the science station. She was humanity's leading expert on xenobiology and had spent decades studying the various species that populated the galaxy. Her role in this mission was not to fight, but to explain. With Captain Morrison's permission, she began to broadcast a detailed explanation of their capabilities. The technology you have witnessed represents 50 years of human research and development, Dr. Carter said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had helped create the systems she was describing. We have been studying galactic warfare since our first contact with your species. Every battle, every weapon, every defensive system used by advanced civilizations has been analyzed and understood. The Corvan commanders listened in stunned silence as the human scientist explained how their empire had been infiltrated and studied. Every diplomatic mission, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange had been an opportunity for humanity to gather intelligence. The humans had not just been learning about galactic civilization, they had been preparing to conquer it. Dr. Carter continued her explanation, describing the quantum tunneling drives that allowed the Vengeance to exist in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, the ship could phase in and out of normal space at will, making it nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. The technology was based on principles that human scientists had discovered while studying the nature of reality itself. The weapon systems were equally advanced. The dark matter cannons fired concentrated streams of exotic matter that could disrupt the fundamental forces holding atoms together. The quantum torpedoes traveled through folded space, bypassing shields and armor to strike directly at their target's vital systems. Each weapon had been designed to exploit specific weaknesses in alien technology. Lieutenant Commander Park accessed the ship's historical databases and began transmitting records of human military development. The Corvan fleet watched in amazement as they saw footage of human weapons testing, ships that moved faster than light without using jump drives, and defensive systems that could stop attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. The most shocking revelation was about the crew themselves. Commander Brooks explained that the 200 humans aboard the Vengeance were not ordinary soldiers. They were the product of centuries of genetic optimization and cybernetic enhancement. Their reaction times were measured in microseconds. Their tactical thinking was enhanced by computer interfaces, and their coordination was achieved through neural networks that allowed them to function as a single organism. Captain Morrison had been chosen not just for his command abilities, but for his capacity to think in ways that alien minds could not predict. His brain had been enhanced with implants that allowed him to process thousands of variables simultaneously, making tactical decisions that required analyzing multiple scenarios in real time. He was not just commanding the ship, he was part of it. Chief Engineer Rodriguez revealed the truth about the ship's power systems. The quantum reactor did not just provide energy, it tapped into the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The ship could draw power from the space between dimensions, From the quantum fluctuations that occurred at the subatomic level, and from the dark energy that permeated all of space, the USS Vengeance had access to nearly unlimited power. Defensive systems were equally impressive. The dimensional shields existed partially outside normal space, making most attacks pass through them harmlessly. When enemy fire did manage to strike the ship's hull, the adaptive materials could change their properties instantly, becoming harder or softer as needed to deflect or absorb incoming energy. But the most devastating revelation was about humanity's long-term strategy. Dr. Carter explained that Earth had been planning this confrontation for decades. The humans had identified the Corvan Empire as the greatest threat to galactic peace and had developed specific countermeasures for their technology and tactics. The USS Vengeance was not just a warship, it was a weapon designed specifically to defeat the Corvan military. The ship's AI, Charlie, began displaying tactical analyses that showed how every aspect of the battle had been predicted and planned. The human commanders had known exactly how the Corvan fleet would respond to their arrival, how they would position their ships, and what weapons they would use. The entire battle had been a carefully orchestrated demonstration of humanity's capabilities. Admiral Zexthil realized that his empire had been fighting a war they had already lost before it began. The humans had not just developed superior technology, they had developed it specifically to counter Corvan strengths. Every weapon, every defensive system, every tactical doctrine had been designed to exploit weaknesses that the Corvan military did not even know they possessed. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. The Corvan crews had been trained to believe that their empire was invincible, that their technology was the most advanced in the galaxy, and that their military traditions were superior to all others. In the space of a few hours, all of those beliefs had been shattered by a single enemy vessel. Lieutenant Walsh demonstrated the ship's targeting systems by simultaneously locking on to every remaining Corvan vessel. The aliens watched their displays as targeting indicators appeared on their screens, showing them exactly where the human weapons were aimed. The message was clear. The USS Vengeance could destroy them all whenever it chose to do so. The revelation continued as Dr. Carter explained humanity's broader strategy. The Corvan Empire was not the only target. Human intelligence had identified 12 major threats to galactic stability, and specific countermeasures had been developed for each one. The technology demonstrated today would be used to bring peace to the galaxy, whether through voluntary cooperation or forced compliance. Captain Morrison finally spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Admiral Zexthil, you now understand what you are facing. Humanity has evolved beyond the limitations that constrain other species. We have transcended the boundaries of conventional warfare and developed capabilities that make resistance futile. Your choice is simple. Join us willingly or be conquered by force. The Corvan fleet commanders found themselves facing a decision that would determine the fate of their entire civilization. They could continue fighting and face complete annihilation, or they could surrender and hope that the humans would show mercy. The demonstration had been clear. Humanity possessed the power to reshape the galaxy, according to their will. As the surviving ships waited for Admiral Zexthil's decision, the crew of the USS Vengeance prepared for the next phase of their mission. The battle had been won, but the war for galactic dominance was just beginning. Humanity had announced its arrival among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Zexthil stared at the tactical display showing the remains of his once mighty fleet. Less than 300 ships remained operational out of the 3,000 that had assembled to defend the Corvan Empire. The human vessel continued to hover in the center of the formation, its weapons still trained on every surviving ship, waiting for his decision with the patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on the communication panel. As he prepared to make the most important decision in his species' history. Around him, his bridge crew waited in silence, their faces showing the mixture of fear and resignation that came from witnessing the impossible. The Eternal Dominion had been humanity's final target, saved for last so that he could watch the destruction of everything he had built. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said finally, his voice carrying the weight of defeat, "the Corvin Empire formally surrenders to humanity. We request terms for the integration of our civilization into your confederation." The words tasted like poison, but they were preferable to the alternative of complete annihilation. Captain Morrison's response was immediate and surprisingly gentle. "Admiral, your decision shows wisdom. Humanity does not seek to destroy what can be preserved and improved. Your people will be treated with respect, your culture will be maintained, and your worlds will prosper under our guidance. The transition will be swift and as painless as possible." The process began within hours. The USS Vengeance transmitted detailed integration protocols to every surviving Corvin vessel, outlining the steps that would transform their empire into a productive member of the human confederation. The procedures were so comprehensive and well planned that it was clear humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Dr. Carter worked with Corvin administrators to establish new governmental structures that would preserve alien culture while ensuring compliance with human strategic objectives. The systems were designed to be efficient and fair, providing the Corvin people with better living conditions and more opportunities than they had enjoyed under their previous military dictatorship. Lieutenant Commander Park coordinated with Corvin communication networks to broadcast the news of surrender to every world in the Empire. The message was delivered by Admiral Zexthel himself, explaining that resistance was futile and that cooperation with humanity offered the best hope for their species, survival and prosperity. The reaction across Corvin space was mixed but predictable. Some worlds welcomed the change, tired of the constant warfare and oppression that had characterized their empire. Others prepared for resistance, unable to accept that their military dominance had ended so completely. The USS Vengeance began visiting each system personally, demonstrating its capabilities to local defense forces and encouraging peaceful compliance. Commander Brooks established training programs for former Corvin military personnel, teaching them how to operate within the new galactic order. The humans showed remarkable patience and understanding, recognizing that the transition would be difficult for a species that had built its entire identity around military conquest. The ship's AI, Charlie, began analyzing Corvin industrial capabilities and infrastructure, identifying areas where human technology could improve efficiency and productivity. The goal was not to exploit the conquered empire, but to integrate it into a larger economic system that would benefit all member species. Chief Engineer Rodriguez worked with Corvin scientists to introduce new technologies that would improve their quality of life. Medical advances that could extend lifespans, agricultural improvements that could feed more people, and energy systems that could power entire civilizations without depleting natural resources. The most impressive aspect of the integration was its speed and thoroughness. Within weeks, Corvin society had been transformed from a military dictatorship into a peaceful democracy. The changes were so comprehensive that many citizens wondered why they had ever resisted human guidance. News of the Corvin surrender spread throughout the galaxy faster than light itself. Other civilizations watched in amazement and terror as reports arrived of humanity's technological capabilities. The idea that a single ship could defeat an entire empire challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare and power. Psychological impact was immediate and profound. 12 major civilizations sent ambassadors to Earth within days of the battle, requesting membership in the Human Confederation. They had seen what resistance brought and preferred voluntary cooperation to forced conquest. Captain Morrison and his crew found themselves serving as temporary governors of Corvin space, their advanced planning systems quickly optimizing alien society for maximum efficiency and happiness. The humans proved to be surprisingly benevolent rulers, more interested in building than destroying. The USS Vengeance remained in orbit around Corvin Prime for 3 months, its presence serving as both a symbol of human power and a guarantee of peace. The ship's crew worked tirelessly to ensure that the transition proceeded smoothly, addressing problems before they could become crises. The economic benefits of joining the Human Confederation became apparent within the first month. Trade with Earth brought new technologies and opportunities, while human investment in Corvin infrastructure created jobs and improved living standards. The former empire began to prosper in ways that had been impossible under military rule. Lieutenant Walsh supervised the decommissioning of Corvin weapons of mass destruction, ensuring that the tools of conquest were replaced with instruments of peace and prosperity. The process was handled with respect for Corvin traditions, while making it clear that the age of military dominance was over. The cultural impact was equally significant. Corvin artists and intellectuals found new inspiration in human philosophy and science, creating works that celebrated the possibilities of peaceful cooperation. The rigid military hierarchy that had stifled creativity for centuries was replaced with systems that encouraged innovation and expression. Dr. Carter established scientific exchange programs that allowed Corvin researchers to study human technology, while contributing their own knowledge to the Confederation's research efforts. The collaboration produced advances that neither species could have achieved alone. As the USS Vengeance prepared to leave Corvin space, Admiral Zixtho requested a final meeting with Captain Morrison. The two commanders met in the human ship's conference room, where the Admiral expressed his gratitude for the merciful treatment his people had received. "Captain," the Admiral said, "we expected conquest and enslavement. Instead, we found partnership and prosperity. Your species has shown us a better way to live, and we are grateful for the opportunity to join your confederation." Captain Morrison smiled, the same slight expression he had shown before the battle began. "Admiral, humanity learned long ago that conquest without purpose leads only to destruction. Our goal is not to rule the galaxy, but to guide it toward a future where all species can thrive. Your people have much to contribute to that future." The USS Vengeance departed Corvin space with a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. The ship had proven that technological superiority could achieve what fleets and armies could not, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that true strength came from knowing when to show mercy. Word of the Corvin integration spread throughout human space, where it was celebrated as a model for future expansion. The Human Confederation had grown by adding an entire civilization without the massive casualties that would have resulted from conventional warfare. As the ship returned to Earth, its crew reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not just won a battle or conquered an empire. They had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. The age of warfare and conquest was ending, replaced by an era of cooperation and shared prosperity. The USS Vengeance had delivered its message to the galaxy. Humanity had arrived among the stars, and they had brought with them the promise of a better future for all species willing to embrace it. The universe would never be the same.